Well, I'll tell you what, God is interested in every single detail. Thank you so much for praying that, because you've literally just spoken into exactly what my word is for this morning. And I was a bit like, sounds a bit depressing for the first morning in February, but thank you, I'm feeling much better and encouraged now. So off we go. Well, thanks so much for having me again. I think last time was a bit of an unexpected visit, but I always love coming. That's why these lot come with me, because they all know how lovely you are. And this morning, I just want to share a little bit of my journey with you, I suppose. I don't know about you, but January for me is, everybody talks about New Year's resolutions, and I don't tend to make New Year's resolutions because, if I'm honest, I'm absolutely rubbish at keeping them. But for me, January is that time of year where you just can you let your breath out, gather your thoughts ready for the new year, but kind of look back a little bit at sort of what's happened before and reflect on what we can take forward into the coming year. And I think that was exactly my lesson from last year. God is my rock, and there's nothing else I can stand on. That was what I learned. That no matter what life throws at me, and it will chuck stuff at you, no matter what we end up facing, I can put my confidence in God, and he's never going to fail me, and he's never ever going to leave me. Even King David had to learn the lesson. In Psalm 62 verse 2, he says, "He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress where I will never be shaken." And there aren't that many things these days that are sort of rock solid, are there? We talk about fast fashion. That's in the news a lot these days. Everybody wants the fastest car. The internet makes everything and all information immediately available, even things like your banking, which, for some people you probably would never have thought that you could just connect to it via a screen. And we talk about life passing us by in the blink of an eye. And even Paul in the Bible likens our Christian life to a race. But for me, I think 2018 was learning that it's not a sprint. We don't have to have a sprint finish, thank God, because I am not a runner. It's more of a marathon. It's more about our endurance and our persistence. And I think, looking in Hebrews, I think Paul would agree. In chapter 12, verses 1 to 3, he says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart." Doesn't sound like much of a sprint, does it? Does sound more like a marathon. And do you know what encouraged me out of that? Jesus persevered. It says he endured the cross because he could hold on to the hope of the joy set before him. And if Jesus thought it was good to persevere, it's probably a good idea for me to do it as well. But here's the thing, persevering's hard. It's tiring. It takes a lot of energy sometimes. And you only have to look at those New Year's resolutions for that. I don't know, I won't ask for a show of hands, but how many people thought, oh yeah, I'll do this year, and we're already on the first week in February, and it's, oh, that's gone by the wayside. How many times do we start off with the best intentions, only to just it to break down a little bit down the line? But for me, Paul gives us the big, massive clue in how to develop our ability to persevere. Look back at verse 2. It says, fixing our eyes on Jesus. It's pretty simple, isn't it? We just have to make sure we're always looking to Jesus, so we will not lose heart, so we won't be overwhelmed. That song is like my anthem from last year. God, I look to you. You see, where we choose to place our focus in life, it'll determine how much perseverance we'll develop. God is our rock. He knows all about what we need to persevere. He knows what we need to keep us going. And he doesn't ask us to keep going for no reason. This isn't just a, let's see how much I can mess with them kind of thing. There's benefit for us if we can learn to persist with God. It develops our faith. He uses each experience we have. So if you're struggling with something this morning, know God's your rock too. It doesn't just apply to me. He is strong enough to see you through anything you may face this year, and for however long you may face it, because he doesn't get tired. He doesn't get bored. He keeps going with us. And one man who realised this was a man called Jacob in Genesis. And he's not I love the way God uses people, because he's not what people would imagine a good Christian would be. When we get to the chapter I want to focus on in Genesis 32, by this point, he's already stolen from his brother. He's had to run away. He's been in exile. He's found his uncle through God, but even his uncle's been grumbling at him. And now, when we get to Genesis 32, God's told him to go home. And it's pretty scary, because he stole his older brother Esau's birthright from his father. And he knows if he goes back, there's a pretty good chance Esau will kill him. And not only him, now he's got this whole clan of family that he's responsible for, and he knows that they could die too. So at this point, Jacob's scared. He's been faced up with his past. He knows he's wronged his brother, and he knows that his future and the future of his children hangs in the balance. And yet God's asked him to go, so he goes. And in the midst of all this fear and everything that's going on, something really, really weird happens. And it just isn't what you would expect. So let's take a look. I'm going to read from verse 22 of Genesis 32. It says, "During the night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 servant wives, and his 11 sons, and crossed the Jabbok River with them. After taking them to the other side, he sent over all his possessions, and this left Jacob all alone in the camp. And a man came and wrestled with him until the dawn began to break. And when the man saw that he would not win the match, he touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of its socket. And then the man said, 'Let me go, for the dawn is breaking.' But Jacob said, 'I will not let you go unless you bless me.' 'What is your name?' the man asked. He replied, 'Jacob.' 'Your name will no longer be Jacob,' the man told him. 'From now on you will be called Israel, because you have fought with God and with men and have won.' 'Please tell me your name,' Jacob said. 'Why do you want to know my name?' the man asked. Then he blessed Jacob there. And Jacob named the place Peniel, which means face of God, for he said, 'I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been spared.' The sun was rising as Jacob left Peniel, and he was limping because of the injury to his hip. Even today, the people of Israel don't eat the tendon near the hip socket because of what happened that night when the man strained the tendon of Jacob's hip. So in the midst of all this fear, this panic, he's setting out to go meet his brother. Jacob comes across this strange man and ends up in a fight with him. It's rather a strange thing to do. You'd think he'd have other priorities. He needs to get his family across the river. He needs to make sure they're all right. But I just get this feeling that in Jacob's heart, he knew that there was something about this man that he had to get a blessing from. And Jacob was persistent. It says he wouldn't let go until the man had to hit him so hard, touch him so hard, that it left him with a limp. First thing I notice, and I just want to let you know this morning, it's okay to wrestle with God. He's completely fine with it. You see, in the end, Jacob didn't have a clue who this man was until he realised that he'd been wrestling with God all night. And I just love God, because God engaged with him. God didn't walk away and sort of just click his fingers and say, "I can deal with you later." God wrestled in it with him. Didn't leave him, didn't give up or just let Jacob go. He stayed with this man until the blessing came. And Jacob had a reason for it too. He knew he needed to be blessed. He knew that if this family were to survive, if things were to change for him, that he had to wrestle with God until he was blessed. He had to persevere. And God had a reason too. When you look at what the name Jacob means, it comes from the word for heel, because Jacob was the second-born twin. Him and Esau were twins, and as they were being born, Esau was first, and Jacob grabbed hold of Esau's heel. And that's why he was named Jacob, because it means supplanter or someone who follows after. For all of his life, he had been told that he would always play second fiddle. That had been labelled on him. And I just feel like God at this point said, enough. You've wrestled with me, you've stuck with me, you're doing as I've asked you to do. Enough, no longer will you come second fiddle. See, Israel combines the word for wrestle and the word for God. So Jacob's gone from being second fiddle to being the one who overcame. It spoke much more of a man who knew the importance of God on his life, who knew the importance of God and his blessing, and who hung on. Jacob hung on through what was obviously a tough time in his life. But Jacob kept God in his sights and he was changed. He became Israel. He went from someone who was behind all the time to someone who was victorious. He knew he had to keep his focus on God no matter what happened. 2018 was a bit of a year where I had to choose where to put my focus, on God or not. There's an old saying, isn't there, that things come in threes, but 2018 kind of felt like things just kept on coming. And things I thought I could count on, things that, were pretty steady in my life, were those pillars, just started to shift a bit. As you saw before Christmas, my mum was really ill with her back last year, and her health has always been absolutely fantastic up to now. She's one of those pillars, her and my dad are one of those pillars in my life, but for 7 months she couldn't walk without a stick or a walker. And when something like that happens to someone you love and you're not really quite sure why, that makes you feel a bit shifty. It makes the ground a little bit uncertain. The other thing, I've been doing my job for a long time. I love working at the homeless centre, but at the back end of last year, we had a number of people, unfortunately, pass away. One round the corner. If you know where our centre is, we're in slap bang in the town centre, opposite B&M, and a group used to sleep round the back of B&M under the car park. And one morning, we hear a hammering on the door, about 9:15. Let me in, let me in, let me in. Such a body's died. And I was like, what? And unfortunately, they'd been all sleeping rough and he'd passed away in his sleep. And I just remember walking round and the ambulance was already there and he was just curled up in the corner with a white blanket over him. And I don't think I'll lose that image for a long time. And it shakes your confidence in what you're doing. It makes you go back to God and say, but why? Why? And I have to admit, I just sort of said to God, where were you? Where were you? Why? And I just got this feeling that, Jesus was knelt by him with his hand on his chest. So as he passed away, he wasn't on his own. God was still with him, because that's who our God is. Life and death happen. Things like this happen, but it still shakes you a little bit, doesn't it? My own health, unfortunately, has always been really, really good, but for the last couple of years I've had stomach pain, and they thought it was one thing, and then it gets to October and the pain just got worse. I'd been out for a lovely meal, it was really nice, but the pain just got really, really bad, and that was on the Thursday night. By the Monday I was yellow and my eyeballs were yellow, so I ended up jaundiced. So I finally get in to see the doctor. I was praying all the time that I'd get the right doctor. So even the small things, God really does answer, because I got the right guy who knew exactly what it was, straight off, no problem. But I'm not telling you this as a downer, because throughout everything, God watched over us. God watched over me, because I went for a blood test and an ultrasound. And I went back for the results, and he said, yes, you've got a gallbladder problem, we'll sort that out. But, and it's never good when a doctor says but, is it? But he said, we've seen something on the ultrasound. I was like, okay, no problem, it's fine. Apparently, for the whole of my 34 years, I've only got one kidney working. Nobody ever knew this. Nobody had ever seen this. I was born premature, but I was completely healthy, not a problem at all. And one of them apparently has just never grown. It's fine, I can live with the other one. But when he went back to the blood test, my kidney function was absolutely fine. There was no problem whatsoever. If I'd just have had a blood test, they would never have known. It's never been a problem. And I think it pulled me up short, and I sort of want to pull you up short, I guess, as well. No matter the things you face, no matter what comes at you, God is still looking after you. He has from the moment you were conceived, or when you were a twinkle in your parents' eye, right through to when you reach his throne room. He is watching over you, and he is your rock. I'm doing all right, by the way, about now, so we're fine. But at the end of 2018, I still felt, have you ever felt stripped? I just felt God had, those things that we say we rely on God, we say he's the one we stand on, and yet there's other things sort of creep in that just become a bit of I can be certain of that, and I can be certain of that, and I can, that's another one of my pillars I can lean on. And I just felt like he'd stripped everything away. And I was like, but God, you're this great God who wants good things for us. And then God reminded me that he's a gardener. He is a gardener. In John 15, verses 1-2, Jesus says, I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit, so they'll produce even more. I can say I felt pruned. Because have you ever seen a plant that a gardener's pruned? I used to love walking around the garden with my granddad. He was Mr. Greenfingers. And when somebody prunes something back, it's stripped. It looks like it's never going to grow again. It looks dead. That's it. It's over. And yet, we've got a fuchsia plant in our front garden. And my dad hacks it to death. Literally, it just looks like it's dead by the end of the winter. But then by summer, it's massive. It's twice as big as what it was before. There's flowers everywhere. It's taking over the place. And I think sometimes that's why God prunes us. He takes us right back to the basics, right back to that one stem sticking out of our lives, which is him. It's just him. See, there's always a purpose to the pruning. The plant's pruned back so it grows in the right direction. One thing I remember my granddad doing was growing runner beans up sticks at the back of his garden. And sometimes I think God prunes us back so we're growing in the direction he wants us to grow. We grow tall, we grow straight, we grow towards him more than anything. It takes some time, doesn't it? It takes some patience from the gardener. But you look at those climbing flowers, when somebody has a lovely pergola, that has to be trained to where to grow. It has to be told where to grow and where to go. And yet, when it blooms, you can walk under it and it's so beautiful, so full of colour, so full of perfume and so full of health. See, I think sometimes God uses the situations we face in life to train us, to redirect our focus back towards him. See, I've had to stop doing things in my ability. I've had to stop leaning on the things that I thought I could lean on because I have to go back to the rock that's God. See, pruning also helps a plant and makes sure it's healthy. By getting rid of the offshoots of the plants, it grows stronger because it can focus the nutrients. And sometimes that's painful because sometimes they don't just prune the dead stuff, they prune the live stuff. And you might be thinking, but God, I don't want to let go of that. I really love that. That's a really important part of my life. But you might be saying, look, if I can just cut it off for now, doesn't mean it'll never grow back. But I need to make you sure you're healthy and you're well and you're going forward. See, in fact, pruning, like I said before, the fuchsia plant was massive. It encourages more fruit. If the plant's healthier, if the plant's stronger, it can pour more energy into growing the fruit than it had before. Just look at Jacob. Look what happened to him. He was pruned back. in this wrestling time. He had to wrestle from night till dawn. It wasn't just a knockout bout. He had to keep going, and he was pruned back. The labels were taken off him. No longer was he to be known as a liar or a second, person, as somebody in second place. It was no longer a thief. He would become someone who overcomes because he held on to God. And he did actually meet his brother, and his brother didn't kill him. And the family, I don't think it was all sunshine and light, but, they healed that rift that had been created. So sometimes the hard times eventually carry a blessing with them, but we have to persevere through. They help us to increase our faith. And at the beginning of this year, I've just keep being reminded by God, I've watched over you, I have watched over you, I have watched over you. And so I don't know what comes this year. I might need to have an operation. We both might need to have an operation. Other things might happen. But the one thing that keeps coming into my mind is this promise that I believe that's for me, from God for this year. And again, I love King David. He's a great guy. He said in Psalm 13, "Yet I am confident I will see the Lord's goodness while I am here in the land of the living." That's the promise I'm going to determine to persevere and take through this year with me. I can't say what will come, but the one thing I can say is I am confident that I will see the goodness of God here in the land of the living. So if you're struggling this morning, if you're unsure, just know that in every single situation, God is your rock and your salvation. He hears, he knows, and he promises that you will see his goodness. Doesn't mean everything turns out rosy and perfect, we know that. We may have to go through those times of wrestling and pruning, and while they're not comfortable in any shape or form, we can be confident we will come out of those situations. We just won't be the same as we entered them. We can see that we will see the Lord's goodness, that no matter what, God will be our rock.